Yeah, Freddie, I had a question for you. Brad Gilmore here. When I first got into working with Book about 5 years ago, I came from music. I was in a whole different world than the wrestling world. Then I came in. Booker and I kind of saw eye to eye on a lot of things. I gained his trust and respect, and I got to work with him on a closer basis on the show. But it's one thing to win the boss's respect, but another to win the boys' respect. And I'm sure you know something about that. Booker always says, you got to be you got to make it in the locker room before you can make it anywhere else. How difficult was it for you coming in as an actor to be a writer in WWE? How difficult was to get the respect of the boys?
Wow, nobody's ever asked me that before. I've wanted to answer this question for a decade. It was the single hardest thing that I've ever experienced career-wise. But like I said, man, I was raised by a bunch of old school martial artists. Like, Daniel Bryan's the Bell Lock, which he had to change the name for. Like, Gene LaBelle was the one who taught me how to choke people out. So I believe in respect, and I believe in earning respect. And when I got there, I remember JBL every day, because I was at every single live show. And every single Monday, he would call me 3 months. That was my nickname, 3 months, because that's how long he thought I would last. And John Cena would call me Ashton Kutcher because he didn't even want to, acknowledge my name. And I would always just smile and nod and do my thing. And eventually, Vince had me, and Cena and I would butt heads a lot, because Vince gave me the monologue class. We call them monologues. He calls them promos.
Yeah.
And because the way they were doing it, it just wasn't as effective as far as, teaching. It was almost telling. And I said, look, man, I grew up in acting workshops. I know how to do this. Let me take over. So he let me take over. One day, Cena just storms in. And he's like, so what kind of crap is this going on in here? And the whole room gets quiet because they all want to see how I'm going to react, right? Yeah. And so there's three major personality types: the alpha, the beta, and the omega. Cena is an alpha personality, and the beta will always sort of concede to the alpha. And that's what he's counting on, because 99% of the actors that I've ever met are beta personalities. But I'm an omega personality. So the way to determine these are compliment someone. If they're like, hey, you're great. Yeah, I know. They're an alpha. If you say, hey, you're great, and they're like, yeah, oh my gosh, you think I'm great, like Sally Fields when she won an Academy Award, they're a beta. And if you compliment an omega, say, yeah, you're great. They just want to know what you want from them. And that's how I am. So when he came in the room, everybody got quiet, and they're all looking at me. It was like Daniel Bryan was in there, Titus was in there, the Bellas were in there, Alicia Fox, there were like 18 of them in there. So the Miz was in there. And so the heat is on, right? And everybody's looking at me, I go, John, let me talk to you outside, bro. And then everybody goes like that. And I'm like, yo, what is this, like a teen comedy? I've been in a few of these, relax. And we walked out of the room, and I'm like, look, man, I know you don't like me. I said, and that's fine. But Vince thinks this is important. And if it's important to Vince, it should be important to you. And he said, and he was very straight up. He goes, look, man, I may be a Neanderthal about this, but you can either do this or you can't. And I said, that's the best point you could make. I said, you can either act or you cannot act. You get better or worse at it, depending on how hard you work, but you can either do it or you can't. I said, you can obviously act, but you can't teach, and I can. And it's my job to identify which one of these kids can act and help them develop that tool. And if you can't help me with that, bounce. And he kind of stopped and looked, and he was like, yeah, all right. And we didn't talk for a good, 8 months, really. And then one of my youngsters did a great promo in the middle of the ring, and John was up next.
Wasn't Titus O'Neil, was it? I'm just playing.
Don't be cold-blooded. Don't be cold-blooded. It was a Jeff Hardy promo when he was on the run to the title. And John kind of put his hand on my shoulder, and he goes, hey, man, that was really good. And I kind of nodded at him, and he nodded at me. And I was like, all right, man, I finally earned that dude's respect. And that may sound like to some people, like, man, he was a real jerk to you. But no. I am an outsider. And notoriously, every time Hollywood has been sort of inserted into the WWE creative, it has never gone well. And I mean never. Like the USA Network would make Vince hire writers from the USA Network on shows that they weren't getting jobs on. And look, I respect them for what they did in the television business, but they had no business being in the writer's room. And so a lot of the wrestlers were like, yo, you got no business being in the writer's room writing wrestling. And I made sure I earned it. I earned it with MVP. I earned it with The Undertaker. I earned it with Jeff, but that was easy because not many people believed in Jeff. He was like, really? You want to do that story? That sounds great. And I earned it with all those old school guys. And once I did that, then it got to be an easier job. And once it got to be an easier job, it became a lot more fun. And I got to pitch bigger stories and things like that and work bigger storylines like the Hardy storyline. And then I had a baby. And that was a wrap.
When you said JBL, I knew it was real right there. As far as
but honestly, man, JBL and I became tight. Like he became one of my main guys that I could go to. Vince wrote this promo that I had written for JBL. He rewrote the whole thing. He's like, no, he's gonna say this, and it had to do with like the stock market crashing, but him getting a bailout. And he goes, you tell him to say a word for word. It was more Vince's voice. He goes, you tell him to say a word for word, Freddie. And so I'm sitting there. I go, hey, John, so Vince wants you to say this word for word. He rewrote what I did. He's like, all right, let me take a look. Okay, yeah, you tell him, no problem. I got it. So he goes out there, and he doesn't say a word of Vince's. He just says the one that I wrote. And I'm looking at Vince, and Vince is shooting daggers of death. I mean, just death. And now I'm feeling like I don't feel the heat from anybody except the person who could fire me, and that was Vince. And I would say no a lot, and that was kind of why he liked me. So if I'm feeling the heat, it's real heat. And I look over, and he goes, what the hell is that? And I go, look, man, I messed up. I kept working with him on mine. I bit the bullet. I said, I kept working with him on mine. I just thought it would work better. I said, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. And he cuts a promo on me like, when I give you a promo, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, man, all these bullets. It's like Sonny Corleone and the Godfather at the toll booth, man. I was like, oh, God. And I finally get excused, and I leave Gorilla, and John comes back, and John, like, cops to the whole thing. And I think it was just more a test to see if I would throw him under the bus. But I think I passed the test because they were both real cool.
You know that was a rip, man. That's what we call a rip right there, man. He got you real good, man. Oh, man.